Look, most of you probably think a sweet potato has to be, well, sweet. And I'd bet most of you rely entirely on this highly fragile, hyper-optimized modern grocery store system that is literally just a few missed shipments away from total collapse. But today, we're looking at the ultimate, unkillable survival crop. It's basically a biological glitch that thrives when absolutely everything else dies.
Seriously, I want you to ask yourself, if your city was completely cut off from all grocery stores tomorrow, could you grow 3 solid pounds of food from a single tiny clipping? I'm going to guess the answer is a hard no. It's actually kind of terrifying how utterly unprepared most modern citizens are for a sudden systemic food collapse. I mean, we've practically lost all knowledge of true crisis agriculture.
Well, meet the solution to your unpreparedness, the Boniato, also known as the blockade survivor. Now, the first thing you really need to understand is that the Boniato suffers from a massive identity crisis. You see, while those bright orange ones you're used to tossing in your cart at the produce aisle are specifically bred for sugar, this Cuban variety is an entirely different beast. It has this white flesh that's starchy and super mild. So instead of acting like a sweet dessert, it functions a lot more like a dense survival bread. It gives you this complex energy bank that keeps you full for much, much longer, which, if you're actually facing a crisis, is exactly what you need to survive.
All right, let's look at Section 1, Systemic Collapse and the Historical Precedent.
So here is exactly how this plant earned its legendary status. Back in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, and because of this, Cuba essentially lost its biggest trade partner literally overnight, kicking off what became known as the Special Period. And guys, this was an era of extreme, desperate food shortages. Just try to imagine an entire nation facing total mass starvation because of a massive trade blockade. So what saved them? The Boniato. It stepped up and became the absolute backbone of their national diet because it was one of the very few crops that could grow fast enough and reliably enough to stop a mass famine dead in its tracks.
Moving on to Section 2, Biological Glitches and Grocery Store Lies.
You've really got to understand what you're actually eating here, because there is a major biological glitch in how we categorize our food today. Regular potatoes, like your standard russets, are tubers. That basically means they can sprout new plants from pretty much any part of their surface. But sweet potatoes, like the Boniato, they aren't tubers at all. They are what's called swollen roots. Anatomically, they're specifically designed to act as this incredible underground battery, storing up energy by breaking down starch into sugar to share with the entire plant when conditions get really tough. And that brings us to the ultimate genetic twist that almost everyone completely misses. The Boniato is practically a biological spy operating in the potato world. It's hiding a totally different DNA profile. It is far more closely tied to a common garden tomato than those starchy russets sitting in your pantry right now. I'm serious. It is 45% related to the morning glory flower, 45% related to the tomato, 10% to other nightshades, and literally 0% related to the potato. Which brings us to a really interesting historical irony, and honestly, a massive deception. You have been lied to in the produce aisle for centuries. When enslaved Africans were brought to the Americas, they saw these swollen roots and started calling them yams because they visually resembled the nyame roots they grew back in West Africa. It was just a colonial misnaming that ended up sticking. Fast forward to today, and your local grocery stores is still putting up signs selling sweet potatoes labeled as yams, even though they are a completely different biological species. Let's jump into Section 3, the trash soil extremophyte.
The real biological secret of the Boniato is that it absolutely loves bad land. While your delicate, picky conventional grains require perfectly tilled, perfectly fertilized conditions just to sprout, the Boniato thrives in degraded, toxic soil that other crops find utterly useless. It is a literal extremophyte of the garden. It acts like an engine that converts trash land into high-calorie fuel. And get this, the whole reason we even eat these in the Americas is because regular potatoes completely failed. When Europeans tried to cultivate standard potatoes down in the Caribbean, the brutal, intense tropical sun cooked them almost instantly. The Boniato became this heat-seeking refugee crop that easily survived the extreme conditions regular potatoes just couldn't handle.
All right, Section 4, Tactical Survival and your 3-pound insurance policy. Look, stop looking for seeds. Seriously, it is a lethal, amateur assumption to think you can just plant a Boniato seed and get a crop. You can't. That is just not how this specific biology works. What you actually need are slips. Let's break down this protocol because it's incredibly simple but insanely effective. Step 1. You let a mature Boniato root sprout these tiny green shoots straight from its skin. Step 2. You pluck those shoots right off the root. Those right there are your slips. And Step 3. You plant just one of those tiny slips into the dirt. And from that single slip, you will yield about 3 pounds of dense, calorie-rich food in a single growing season. Guys, that is massive production from minimal input. That is what true crisis farming looks like.
Finally, let's look at Section 5, Culinary Survival and the Underground Oven.
Because the Boniato is such a hardy, rugged crop, traditional Cuban cooking totally reflects its survivalist roots. The method here is absolutely legendary. First, you dig an underground roasting pit. Then, you wrap the roots tightly in banana leaves and let them steam deep beneath the earth. Why do it this way? Well, because it preserves literally 100% of the plant's nutrition. But beyond just the pure utility of it, this method completely transforms the taste. The slow underground roast maximizes this nutty, rich flavor profile that makes the root taste incredibly similar to roasted chestnuts rather than just some bland vegetable. You get maximum survival calories and a meal that actually tastes amazing.
Look, we really need to drop the arrogance we have about our modern food systems. We are standing next to an unkillable survival hero that actually thrives when the world shuts down. Think about it. We took a root that survived a massive national blockade, we renamed it over centuries of colonial confusion because it vaguely looked like an African staple, and then modern science comes along and realizes it's actually more closely related to a tomato than a potato.
This plant just defies all logic. It thrives in toxic trash soil. It thrives in brutal, blistering heat that would instantly destroy conventional crops. It grows 3 pounds of starchy survival bread from a single, tiny, clipped slip. When the entire global supply chain fractures, this is exactly what will keep you alive. I mean, really think about it. A sweet potato that isn't sweet is the reason an entire country didn't starve. Now that's absolutely wild.